I can incorporate some of those priorities and then maybe have something to pass over or at least email over.
I mean, I think so. Do you guys have your priorities at this point?
Yes.
So when you talk, when you say if you could talk priorities, you are looking for us to outline our priorities.
Yes. Do you have your priorities?
I do.
Okay.
So I think that, well, at least on for section 1.
Okay.
And you know what we can do is, you know, I think that we can definitely talk through what our priorities are, and then put together some, you know, we have a semblance of a proposal that's not quite 100%.
That's kind of where I feel like we're at is what we're on.
But we can talk through a little bit where we're at. I think that this language, what we have in this language is a lot of, you know, it's old language, right? And so when we talk about the first letter, A, supplements listed in this appendix are granted only on the basis of the 1 school year. I mean, we look at that as not being it's a declaratory statement, if you will. It's not intended to do any or have any impact on, from our perspective, how frequently positions are advertised. Simply putting a time limit and saying, okay, much like annual contract teachers are appointed on a year-by-year basis, so are these positions. And just like an annual contract teacher, we can reappoint these individuals or not, based upon their performance in the role. And so I think that one of our priorities will be to outline language that clearly clarifies this, so that, you know, and I believe, quite honestly, I think that in my discussions with teachers and whether it be that are supplements for either coaching or, you know, academic or clubs, they actually prefer knowing that if they're in the supplemental position and they're doing a good job, that they can be reappointed, and they're not going to have to go through the process of you know, us advertising, them reapplying for their position year after year. Okay. In addition, the whole idea that, you know, so we do not take issue with the thought process that people in the instructional bargaining unit are given preference in this contract. However, I think that from, you know, the language that's outlined in 3 is clearly outdated. B3 and B3 is clearly outdated. Those
The 1, 2, 3.
Where it says site administrators are discouraged from assigning supplemental responsibilities to non-instructional district employees who.
Okay, I'm in the right spot. Sorry.
We're operating currently and have been operating for some time under the provision of the FLSA that allows for us to issue a nominal fee to those individuals that are in hourly positions. And so we're no longer in a position where we have to pay those individuals on an hourly basis for these supplemental positions. So from our perspective, it makes a lot more sense to give, you know, our preference is to have teachers on campus and quite honestly, individuals on campus doing these supplemental positions. You know, and the supplemental positions that you see going outside of your unit, by the way, 85% this year. Well, actually, not this year, last year. We get the year. What year? We just started and it was so 85% from 22-23 were instructional, right? 85% went to instructional. But I think in talking to superintendent, he greatly prefers having individuals that are on campus with those individual students on a day-to-day basis, provide those, you know, the services as it relates to the supplemental responsibilities. And so our preference would actually be to change the order of operations to give preference to instructional staff first, and then to individuals on campus, and then opening it up to individuals off campus, and then ultimately go into outside outside the county, outside the district,
Okay, got it. Okay, so when you talk about individuals off campus, you're referring to
other schools.
other schools and then community members.
Right.
Okay.
And the thought process is that instead of, I mean, right now, the language in the contract reads, qualified instructional staff applicants will be sought from within the school. So, you know, so with a strict adherence to the contract, we would be fine with regard to, you know, being in compliance with the contract as long as we sought applicants from within the school. I think that what we want to do is clarify and say, we will have a clear order of operations for consideration. Right? And so and I think that from our perspective as well, we don't have any problem with sending out notice or posting on a bulletin board with a thumbtack notice of the vacancy, right? But then being able to then utilize, we don't utilize ATS for all of our positions. But for the positions where it makes sense to utilize ATS, we would say, okay, we're gonna post it on ATS. We've sent notice first before we post it on ATS, so everyone's aware. And then we would use an order of operations for consideration.
Okay.
And so that really allows for the principal to make the best decision possible based on, you know, that order of operations. Now, you know, the language that's in the contract, we feel like right now is very straightforward. I think that we would be going one step beyond what's in the contract right now by changing that or the HO.
Okay. Is that it? Okay.
From our perspective, as it relates to section 1, right? So I mean, there's some other small changes that are in there. I mean, I would, in my thought, I mean, we'll come out with a proposal, but in my thought, 3, the 1B3 is outdated. So
Yeah.
we would probably end up proposing that we strike that altogether. And you know, because it's not reflective of the current times, and then that the preference would be outlined in B. Sorry, 4A through C, and what would it be? A through D.
Okay. Okay, so some of our priorities is a bit of the restructuring of some language in there. So what our initial proposal was before the piece of this had a lot of things taken out and then repositioned to where it made more logical sense on how to read through, not necessarily a rewritten of the language. We think when it comes to the idea of a position is not declared vacant at the end of a year, that there has to be some sort of process as to why it's not vacant, right? So if I'm the sponsor of the junior class and I'm going to be reappointed into that position, why am I being reappointed into that position? Or on the other hand, why am I being removed from that position? What is deemed that I've done poorly? So is there a review process that can be put in place? I think some sites have maybe a review process for sports, but maybe it's not being used internally for academics or the academic type clubs. And what does that review process look like to deem a reappointment versus a non-reappointment, right? We're going to take someone out of a position. And is that, maybe that's happening in May. Hey, these are the list of supplements. Maybe if you're still interested in this supplement, let us know, or let us know if you no longer want to be involved with this supplement. So then you have a true list of vacancies, people that did not want to fill that position anymore for coming into August, into your pre-planning week. So creating almost a two-step system there. To not make everything vacant, but to figure out where everyone's status is landing before going into that August timeframe. We want to have some transparency on what the positions are expected to do, right? What does the season outline look like? And I think that that's maybe really clear in sports, but not as clear in our academic departments and our clubs. And what if I'm taking on Key Club and I'm expected to do this, this, and this, but I'm not told that ahead of time, and my supplement's $4. I might be really surprised when I get in there and that's, all that I'm getting. What is like the expectation of transparency? The transparency in the hiring process. So if it's gonna be done this way, it's done that way across all school sites. Because right now, for example, we're gonna announce to school sites internally before posting on ATS. How long are we waiting till we post on ATS? It's not clear in the contract, right? So
It's
could you
not
set,
defined by the contract.
exactly, it's not defined by
And
the
it would be,
contract.
it'll honestly be our preference to not,
Okay,
but I mean, as long as the notice is given, basically my thought process is the notice would be given, and it's also not clear because we use ATS for some, but not all, and we don't want to use ATS for all, because part of the whole reason for this is that we want to avoid the administrative burden associated with reposting these positions every single year. So, for a lot of these academic positions, there's only a certain, if you're talking about an department head, well, there's 4 people that can be considered, could be 4 or 5 people that could be considered for it, and it will be relevant, right? So,
and speaking kind of that is if we're gonna shift to an idea that people are reappointed into these positions, maybe there's a term limit on their position holding, because at our elementary and middle schools, there are only so many supplements to go around, and when someone locks into it and they're going to retire with the district, nobody else gets a chance to do that supplement. And that's the impression that's being given off at school sites, is that like someone's locked in and Susan's going to ride it out till she dies at the district, and it's like
we won't ever do that.
a term limit. Okay.
I do have a question. What do we do in terms of my band director who gets a supplement, chorus teacher getting a supplement?
Yeah.
Do that person have to apply for that position every year?
No, I think it's tied to their job.
But it is a supplement on the supplement sheet. So we're saying that for one, theoretically, we're saying that for all.
No,
I just want to get
it's a great question because it came up.
We haven't
when
gotten
were
to it yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of our priorities is to split up.
We could consider that, but I just can't think of any situation where we would say, okay, you've been the math coach for 10 years, we're not going to let you do it anymore, even though you didn't do it.
I think it's like more of like when you're talking about your smaller sites where there's less supplements available and everyone wants a piece or wants to have a supplement, and department heads, which are larger supplements than maybe the math coaches, and they're, when they get a percentage for every additional unit that's in their department, and somebody's that department head for forever, or right, it doesn't give anybody else the opportunity to do that. And so is there a review process of, well, we all
I
don't
think
like
every
these.
single year like you talked about before, I think we currently do look and say, is this person still doing a good job in this role? And then, making the determination. If they're not doing a good job in the role, there's, that's part of the reason why that first, sentence is there. All supplements listed as finished and granted on the basis of one school year. So that if a person is not doing a good job, then LCS can take them out of that job.
Mm-hmm. So then the other thing we'd like to do is create a split amongst the different types of supplements. Sport, pull it out, it's its own. Animal, it's its own thing. Some way to maybe restructure the supplement chart, so that way it's very clear what's going on with sports, academic, core course function. That's like your band, like that you have to be the band teacher to be the band, marching band person, so on and so forth. The administrative functions, which are your department head type things, clubs, extras, so all the sponsorships, advanced degrees, and then your job specific, where like SLPs and other things, they're getting supplements. And right now they're all just in that supplement chart, but they're not all coming from the same pot of money, and then they're not all being used and dispersed the same way, right? Because the band director, it is very specific to that scenario, or and you could go down the list of a variety of different things where that's the only person that can do that job. And so
it's similar with the athletic director as well. I mean, there's other, but we're open to that. We're open to reconsidering the way that we have the supplements currently structured. I do think that when it boils down to the most influential aspect of it, we start with what's in section 1
Mhm.
and what's required and how we go about posting those positions. And our main goal is to avoid administrative burden.
Uh-huh.
We feel like right now we've got a, pretty decent way of selecting these individuals. Whatever we do, we think it could probably be improved upon, but whatever we do to improve upon it can't add a ton of administrative burden to the principals, because the principals are already extremely busy.
So I wanted to make sure I was, get clarification. So you were asking for a May timeframe to like let all the other teachers know?
Like, if the expectation is that there's a list posted in August, right? Hypothetically, that list is somewhere rolling and it's getting typed in. Johnny's doing this, Susan's doing this, so on and so forth. That same list is put out in May. Who wants to no longer do this? Some way, again, like administrative burden, right? So if we're talking about, well, what's the easiest way to do that? Okay, if you no longer want to do this supplement, let me know. And then maybe you get 5 emails that say, I no longer want to be the junior class sponsor. Now you know that that's for sure a vacancy. You've got to find between now and August, and when you repost it again. Or if it comes down to sport, the athletic teams might have it a little bit slightly different, because an athletic coach might let you know at the end of that season, as opposed to an academic sponsor that's with kids until May.
So I probably, from the high school perspective,
Yeah.
would say you probably don't want to do a time frame, only because many of your activities are rolling.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just being honest. I'll just use New Alphabet,
Yeah.
right? So math competition. That team, like for us, is competing all year. There really isn't any slowdown. I mean, we had a guy, Steve Freelander, who was pretty well known as fall, right? I mean, serious. They traveled everywhere. I mean, listen, they put more cash in one year than baseball. Okay, but they were academic. That was their sport. That was their league. And, like, matter of fact, I even had to rearrange some things to help them out, just because their time was different. Like, you're correct. Sports are at one pace, but even then, fall sports are starting up in May, and so,
I think there's definitely a need to be more flexible in terms of when we're starting, when we're advertising supplements that are vacant. So like
would you be okay if it was, see, what I'm saying by rolling is, sometimes, look, honestly, this is say junior sponsor, right? Junior sponsor, usually you're in charge of the prom.
Yep.
That's like the #1 task that you have, right? Yep. Okay, and that's a fleeting thing. You got some people who are like, they go, I'm all for it, and then if they're at the prom where everybody got drunk and got thrown out, then they're like, oh no, I'm out, right? And so you may have somebody who was on board in May, and by the time they thought about it with their spouse and they got to July, they go, I'm out. Now, what I'm saying is, what I would do, just to make it fair to everyone, is once a month, I would send out a rolling list. What's available? Because the thing is, if you ask me at one time to try to get everybody, May is already crazy. Like I am telling y'all, between AP testing, EOC testing, chasing kids to try to graduate, I can't do it. I mean, I give my full effort to it, but to try to remember that task, and on top of that, I feel like we may be throwing a burden on the teachers too. I want to be careful, because I've been in both places, you know what I mean? Like, they've got stuff going on, they've got end of the year things going, and there may be differences between one level versus another. I just want to be careful that we don't, do that.
We're not opposed to doing high school, middle school, elementary somewhat differently from time to time based on those. We're not opposed to the conversations that we had even 3 years ago when we were dealing about supplements, where maybe it's 3 times during the year that they become, this is the focal point. So fall, spring, summer, whatever that looks like operationally, you say once a month, someone else may go not once a month. So you guys need to figure out what.
Well, I mean, there's, and even then it becomes difficult, right? Because there's things going on and your plate is just full. I mean, I'm understanding the, there are teachers, there are even sometimes aides who want opportunities to do supplements, and they want to know, hey, I didn't even know about this, right?
Our position would be, quite honestly, it would work better for us if it was open. So whether, he says once a month, but that's what would work operationally for his school, but there has to be the ability for us to post these positions, much like you would any other job within.
So I think if you separated, right, academics and sports, the posting continuously, in the sports world makes sense because you have to use ATS, right? That's what you want to use. When you're looking at academics, how are we getting notified
Well, that's
that academic scenario of someone's dropped out of this, now we're doing this. Now it kind of falls back on an administrative shoulder to notify that someone's left.
That's a building. Like the building principals usually set up how information is dispersed. And I'd be lying to you if I said everybody does it the same way. I mean, honestly, we
think that what I was getting at before, so when I'm done happened, it wasn't able to circle back to this, was when you separate the two, we know that right now we've designated ATS to be used for our athletic positions. But in my mind, what would probably work best is we satisfy the initial requirement that we send it out to the instructional staff of our school, by emailing it to them and posting it with a contact, right? And then in that process, we say, this is how you apply. So if it's an ATS position that's out there on board, then we would say, okay, in order to apply, this is what you do. Otherwise, if it's an academic position where we don't use ATS, then you express interest by sending me, the principal, an email, right? But we would clearly articulate what they need to do to show interest in each of those positions, and then we would go through a selection process. But it is just imperative that we have the ability to do that anytime.
I was just gonna say, the wrong time to send out this rag when we finish school, because I'm get all the no's in America. But I try to wait a month, and we do the dumb thing, but I know teachers are not on campus. I get that. And I do try to send the email out a month later after you have calmed down a little bit, you thought about it a little bit, because if I send that out the day after school get out, I won't even have a football coach, because everybody's just tired about everything. And so I think a month later, and it gives us an opportunity to go into July with a level head, and we start to put that information out. But 3 times a year, I think it's, I don't know.
One of the things that I think is kind of opposing is this idea that we need ATS as a uniform way of doing the sports, but we cannot seem to agree that there be a uniform way that we do it at all of our sites. So it doesn't compute in the sense that I think we can come to some basic agreement of processes and expectations that would be like ATS, but for a site-based, because as you said, this is how you apply. Well, one site it's an email. I transfer over another school, I email, but that's not what we use. We use a form. But like there should be some commonality of communication, whatever that is at the end.
So I can appreciate that, wanting to have some consistency. I think that level of detail and consistency is not something that we feel like would be appropriate. But I think that we can definitely talk through exactly, what that process could look like. I mean, what we're trying to avoid more than anything is administrative burden associated with this aspect, because we already have administrative burden associated with just hiring normal teachers, and this is almost as large if you were to require every supplement to be advertised every year and go through a selection process every year, and that just the potential for how large this can be. I don't think anyone really understands.
No one wants to make it an albatross that is a burden, but we also want to make sure that you understand that there are requests to increase the supplement base and money that now is being told that is not a priority for the bargaining unit that has it in their contract. So, I mean, there's a point in time where there's gonna have to be some middle ground on these things because, you know, there's a reason historically why it's in the contract, the way it's in the contract, whether folks want to remember what the intent of that language is. That's neither here nor there. The intent is still the intent of the association, though. You know, it's not to increase a burden on administrators, but it's to create a fair and transparent process. Because unfortunately, most of these people are living off of these supplements because their salary isn't enough. And that's why they like them. Principals use them as enticements sometimes. You come to school, I got this open supplement, get a little extra. Like there are things that go along with supplements, whether it be some more recent things that are in advance of the process even taking place, that we just have to make sure that we're very thoughtful about. We're not trying to make life difficult for the principals, but we do want to make sure that everybody feels like they're a part of the process and that it's not happening with a nod and a wink because there's a good old boy system on some other side. So we just need to find what that looks like.
Yeah, ultimately, we've had this discussion. The selection of individuals that would fill supplements is at the discretion of the site administrator. And that's a measure, right, that they will not be negotiated in this session as we move forward. That aspect is sort of locked in. We're not going to create contract language that gives away that management right. But we are fully prepared to negotiate other procedural aspects that can help us manage this process more effectively.
So when we talk about not giving up the managerial right of who to hire as a qualified individual, and if we weren't using ATX, right, that wasn't a thing, and you're looking for a baseball coach and someone at the school site applies to be the baseball coach internally, and they have somewhat of an experience of doing baseball things, hypothetically, that's the person that would have been hired. But when it goes out on ATS, right, as the initial thing, follow me through before we're going to stop, right? If it's posted, if the school site's internally notified, and then it goes on ATS, and your internal person is now seen amongst an applicant list of 4 or 5 other people, and one happens to be the world's best baseball player ever, and they're going to get the position, right? Because hypothetically they'd be more qualified. But if they was never advertised duly at the same time, wouldn't the instructional staff member have gotten it first?
So I want to respond. First off, we're always going to do what's in the best interest that we can.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also going to, it is also our preference. I think if you would ask the principals to a person, would you rather have someone that is on site
Yeah.
than someone who is not, if someone's from the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would say they want someone on site. So with this in mind, before I think about, I'll ask Scott, tell us, how did we feel, a position like head football coach or head volleyball coach, or what are these highly preferred positions before ATS? Were we just, what do we do?
You still grab?
Yeah. Put it on pat, we put it out there first.
So you put it on packs?
Well, not just that,
Not
you
just
have to put it on FHSAA. And then you may put it on the National Association as well. Usually your football, baseball, volleyball positions, national searches. National. So usually what you're doing at first is, I'll just give you an example. Football coach, easily you're going to get 100+ applications from across the country. I'm talking about everywhere from California to here. And that is because people want to be coaches. You got assistant coaches. Sometimes you got college coaches. They want to come back down. And so a lot of times you're filtering all those, and then you're trying to tell all these people, get on the system because you want to, take a look at them.
Yeah.
Usually, depending on the sport, you may end up putting together a committee, right? You're trying to get parents, all that, because you have to have their input. If anybody's ever had their kids play ball, parents are heavily invested in who's going to become that coach. So you have to nuance this process. And I'm not saying this to make it hard. I'm just saying this is the is. And then, you bring, once everybody applies, sometimes people will take themselves out because they don't have any qualifications. I can't even get you to teach anything. you know, you can look at all those factors, like somebody already on campus, you know, where they, I mean, like those factors come along.
So
It's the same
so-
with band.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, band is a national.
So my only point was, so ATS is essentially just an easier tool for us to get it out there. Before the, you know, the implementation of ATS, the principals were still posting these things all over the place in order to garner interest. You know, and so, and that's just a requirement of those types of positions. Now, I'll guarantee you the same, you know, when you talk about an assistant coach, an assistant JV coach, or an assistant, you know, an assistant coach in another sport, where they're putting in 30 to 40 hours a week and they're getting a $3,000 supplement. Those aren't the highly sought after supplements. And that's part of the reason why, I mean, at least amongst teachers, right?
Yeah.
We can barely get those filled. Those are the reasons why we have to take those out to the community, where individuals who have an interest in that particular sport will come in and want to coach, right? Because, you know, to be honest with you, the supplement amounts for some of these assistant coaches and the time commitments, you know, they're not enticing. So, I mean, it's a struggle.
So speaking of supplement amounts, is there room in, Naomi's not here, so I don't know, in the financial sector of the supplements to de-itemize them? So for example, if the school doesn't have a lacrosse team, the money that's going to that lacrosse team or that's itemized for that lacrosse team can be redirected to another academic club that maybe wants sponsorship. Is there another sport that's not maybe needing more funding? Or, you know, if there's not all, you know, the Excel spreadsheet that I had like 10 assistant football coaches, maybe not all 10 assistant football coaches are being hired. And that's $3,000 so a coach. Can that money be re-itemized elsewhere? I'm under the impression right now it can't be because it's line item, but can we create that flexibility to use those funds in other aspects that could excel something else at that school site and fund something else? I mean, I think athletics are coded one way probably, and then the academic pool is coded another way, but creating that,
I think if we dig into this, that's definitely a possibility.
yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
super.
Not out of the, again, recorded within that.
Within that pool site, yes, so you have a robotics club that's really popping, but you don't have this. Can we shift some money from that to robotics club? That maybe would find that, or you have a bunch of unfunded clubs. I mean, high school, maybe it's a little more prevalent because there's so many
Right.
academic clubs that aren't getting funded, and could
I
they
think
get
that's
that?
an aspect that we can
Also
bring.
a site. Do something.
Well, in that, and then there's only so much money in that big pool that can get divided up after a certain point, and then it just runs out, especially at a high school when there's anime, you know, a variety of national honor societies, you know, guitar this, robotics that, the supplementer is still looking for a line item out there. We can
So
talk.
what you say,
The supplementer controls the supplements at the school site, I think. We can
Receive the supplement.
receive the supplement, yeah. Supplement.
So the principal should get something.
Supplement.
Argument to me.
No,
We're keeping that in bargaining.
They get it. They're already getting it. Called site facilitator.
So those are the kinds of things. I mean, I think.
Well, I mean, I think it was two problems.
Well, see,
But don't look at all.
But my thing is, you have a true process. Leon has a true process. I'm sure there's other schools that have a true process. The process is just the transparency of offering, making people aware, is making sure that there's a review process of whatever the minimum, like the median targets are to doing the job, because we talked internally about, you know, you've got Key Club and you got 4 different high schools and 4 different payments for Key Club, and they're doing the same thing. So,
should be.
I mean,
In theory.
are they?
I mean, in theory,
But,
but let me just say this, right? So, you know, working in different schools, I will tell you, so your site committees are really based upon how teachers feel on the campus. Now, a lot has to do maybe who was the first leader with them, right? But what I'm saying is, it's like, I've been in certain buildings and they didn't want a site collector process. Like at mine, you got to turn in paperwork for, making sure you register students, right? Because there's so many asking for that coaching stuff. And so they have this very detailed process that they believe in, right? Like they bring them in, here's the changes that they want, right? Then you have other places where they don't have much of anything. It's just, can we grab anybody? And then you just put them in. And so I think a lot of times the process is based upon just how people feel and how they want to honor what's there.
I saw some documents at a school site that had like an exit process for the athletic department, and it was like the season's over. How many people auditioned? How many people tried out? When were your practices held? How many games? All the things, what money was brought in, how many uniforms are at the beginning of the year versus at the end of the year. And I think that exit process for academics could be just as important, because you have teachers that go, hey, I'm gonna come back and do junior class and I'm gonna do the prom and this, but then in the middle of the summer, they find a new job and just wipe your hands clean, and you've got a whole inventory of this, that, and the other for prom or for one of your other clubs. Or what does Mu Alpha Theta do when that person just closes their hands on it midsummer and walk away, and the administrative staff doesn't have any real information on it, and now we're hunting down the previous person. Hey, what did you do with Mu Alpha Theta, so it doesn't totally just fall apart on these kids? And that creating maybe some sort of standardized exit interview at the end of the year that teachers hand back in with what happened.
So I'll just give the details of our process is, I got teachers that won't give you nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, straight up. They just say, I'm done. I'm not gonna, look, you work with about 100 teachers. You tell me there's 100 different personalities in that building. Okay. And so what I'm saying is, in theory, right? It's just like, even when we put that site process that we have at Child, there are just some people who go, I don't want to do it, and I'm not taking a supplement, so I don't have to deal with that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, as many people as you got inside the building, you're gonna have different opinions about.
We're definitely open to it. I think that your question and your initial proposal, were sort of in conflict in that, the idea of taking the money and being able to reassign it, reallocate it within the greater scheme of things, but then also thinking we must have the same supplement across all school systems that are in direct conflict, right? And so to me, it's like, if you want to have site-based decision-making with your site councils, or do you want to dictate it by contract? And so I think that what we've done is, with these site groups, they've, like Joe's talked about, they've really looked at that, and they go through the process. They've got a real system set up. And where we don't have that, we have, set amounts, and if there's no team, if there's no club, then that money, that whatever money may have been there, a lot of these clubs are largely self-sustained, and so you may have a small supplement. That supplement is absorbed and allocated in other places. It's definitely not going unutilized. These schools don't get nearly the funding that they need to be able to support these programs as it stands.
I think site consistency and wanting to retain the extra money are not in opposition at all. And so what we've done in another county is it's supplements that are the same everywhere are the same in the contract. Then we had a floating pool of X amount of supplements that each site decided whatever you're going to do with it, pretty much. So like, you have robotics, you have Mu Alpha Theta, every school has Mu Alpha Theta, that's in the contract.
But the only problem with that, and I'm just saying, I was at AD too. The only problem with that is that clubs are like a roller coaster. Right. You may have 100 one year and you may have 50 the next year, right? And a lot of times clubs are based upon the teacher. I mean, I've seen clubs that were super popular because the person who was doing the club, and then when the sponsorship changed, the numbers dove down. No disrespect to the person, it changed once, there was something, some kind of aura or whatever that they had, but that's the only thing that I see is that if, you got a finite amount of dollars, and what happens when the requests are way up here, right? And I think that's at least one of the things that my like group tries to do is they, on the coaching side of it, not the sports coaching, but the coaching supplement, is they try to work that out in a judicious process.
We would be open to seeing some, something. One of those,
Yeah.
Structure that maybe takes that into consideration. Other than that, I think based on our timing, we wanted to be able to caucus and work on putting together some language that of things that may be of importance to you. Do you want to go and do that now?
That's fine. Yeah, we can take care of
How
that.
long do you want to take?
I
It
think
is
no more,
4:15.
no more than 30. And then that gives us time to each present and then discuss and then be on our way.
Let's do 30.
Okay, so 4:45, just for even numbers, okay.
Thank you very much.
Well,
And we don't have to, we don't have to.
This is the last year.
colors.
Supposed to be red.
Fingerprint.
Yeah,
Well, what a vomit is.
yeah, it looks like peach, doesn't it? This looks like the colors. These look like.
I got one for you when we're done. Oh, shoot, we all can't like that.
All right, so this is just our first go at, defining language as we'd like to see it for supplements in section 1, right? And I'll read through. First one is all supplement, current language, all supplements listed in this appendix are granted only on the basis of 1 school year. And then we've added individuals may be reappointed at the discretion of the site administrator. Appointments into a supplemental role. Appointment into a supplemental role is considered to be at will throughout the year, and the individual may be removed at any time. Okay, we run into that issue because, there's often, we want to just clarify that, if someone does something that is egregious during the course of the year, that person may be taken out and that they're not guaranteed that supplement throughout the entire season.
Okay, so as that relates to how people are paid for these supplements, it's my understanding that like a sports coach is either paid maybe at the end of their season or once in the middle, once at the end. Not anymore.
No,
they play in.
Yeah, they're basically, when you turn them in right now.
Yeah.
All the fall sports, any of the supplements, they'll start getting.
They're spread across there.
October over 10 main checks.
What if they're not part of the instructional unit and they're not on LCS pay?
I'll have to double check with them. I think they still,
I can tell. So if they're supplemental,
Oh,
Yeah.
if they're supplemental, they're paid at the end of the season.
Yes.
Okay.
But we have to put that on there.
so is there a period here where I have to refund money if I'm let go and I've been paid out, or
Well, I
if
think
I've worked a certain amount of time and then I'm let go 2 months into the season, am I paid for those 2 months?
you would not be asked to refund money to us, but for instance, you've performed some work, then ultimately, my thought on this whole issue would be that they would receive something, but they may not receive the full sum. So that may be something that we could come to an agreement on, is if they perform some of the duties and they would get at least a minimum percentage.
And then whenever that new teacher comes or Lillian, they'll get the rest.
if it overlaps, we usually would.
But
Continue pay. If it doesn't, they will get their full.
I don't want to spin our wheels on this an awful lot, because it's really just to sort of articulate that it's not a guarantee that you're going to keep it throughout the entire year. I mean, when Scott was talking about it, he was telling me about one time where he had to remove a coach because they showed out at a football game, and right, and so that's really in all the time that you've been doing it, that's happened one time, right? So I don't want to spend a ton of time, focused in on something that doesn't really happen all that frequently.
Or coach that's gonna go out on the LA, you're pregnant.
Exactly.
Yeah, those sort of things.
So, all right.
I gotta double check, but we'll discuss.
B,
All right, I'm gonna just read through the entire thing.
Uh-huh.
So site administrators shall provide all instructional employees at their site an opportunity to assume supplemental responsibilities as described in this appendix and accompanying chart as vacancies occur. To this end, the site administrator shall provide a list of all vacant site supplements to employees on the first day of pre-planning at the beginning of each year. Selection for supplemental duties shall be the responsibility of the site administrator and may be based on either objective or subjective criteria. Documentation pertaining to the evaluation and selection of the applicant shall be retained for 3 years and available upon request. Okay, so the primary differences in the language there would be that, well, yeah, we don't mind providing the list at the beginning of the year, but from our perspective, it should be a continuous circular. However you say that.
Cyclical.
There we go. That's more, yeah.
Yeah.
Cyclical. I can't say the word. That's process. Throughout the year, so that we, much like the way that we fill regular positions within our district, is as the vacancy arises, we have the ability to fill it immediately, and that way we don't have this buildup of positions that create administrative burden when the first day rolls around. Okay, the second line. We have no air and then we made of no power, and so the second one there was really, it felt like that was missing, that the last line was there, documentation pertaining to the evaluation and selection of applicants shall be retained, right? But it didn't really speak to what that criteria should be, right? So what we're outlining is that, once again, we consider this to be a management right? And so the selection shall, may be either objective or subjective criteria, right? It's at the discretion of the site administrator. 2, any questions on that before I move to 2? 2, as vacancies or new supplements occur, employees will be informed via email and by posting on the LCTA bulletin board with contact at least 5, with a thumbtack's not there, right? Within 5 work days prior to filling such vacancy. A list of all supplements and the supplement amounts and persons receiving supplements shall be provided to employees via email. And that was just Scribner's error, I believe. So, I added email in there. And by posting on the LCTA bulletin board by October 15th by the site administrator. For supplemental positions filled after this date, site administrators will make every effort to update the LCTA bulletin board as needed to reflect the information pertaining to the filled positions, right? So we know we're maintaining that October 15th date because we recognize that we want a date earlier on in the first semester where we can sort of put it out there and say this is who's in every supplemental position, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we also recognize that there will be positions that are filled after that date or throughout the year that we would also be that we would need to report on, right? So that's why we would put that out after. Questions on that?
Is it possible to create a Excel file shared via OneDrive at the school site for this information?
Absolutely.
As a quicker point of contact rather than stone and chiseling it to an LCTA bulletin board. Martina and I are still working on ours. We've got 150 to go.
Guys, just quickly, basically, what teachers are willing to take on.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, because I love OneDrive. It's amazing.
Mhm.
But I got folks that they want no part of OneDrive. They want the email.
Email it out.
I think that would be totally fine. It's not necessarily. I think that mechanism is great. It's not something that I want to necessarily put into the contract that every school will have a OneDrive download,
So
right?
you'd rather.
The bulletin board?
Everybody
The bulletin board?
I thought you were trying to modernize it.
Yeah.
Forward.
Yeah, so I love the idea of moving. the bulletin board with the thumbtack, right? Yeah. All right, moving on. Moving on.
Hey, one roll at a time, man.
We are proposing that we strike all of 3. Just because it is from a different time, okay? 4. When there is a vacancy in a supplemental position, the site administrator shall notify employees of their respective site of the vacancy and provide instructions on how to apply for consideration. The following procedures related to order of consideration will be implemented. However, nothing in this procedure should be misconstrued to limit the site administrator's discretion as it relates to candidate selection. These colors are throwing me off. I have a hard
Did
time
you just type all this up right now?
We had 30 minutes. Qualified instructional staff will be considered from within the school as the first order of operations. B, qualified non-instructional staff applicants will be considered from within the school. C, qualified staff applicants will be considered from other schools within the district, except that a high school is not required to seek applicants from other district high schools to fill a coaching vacancy. And then D, there shouldn't be a strike through the D portion, there should be just D, right? Qualified applicants from outside the school district will be considered, right? And then the remaining portion is there. And what we see is this is the order of operations for consideration. No matter how you go about posting the position, whether it be internal, ATS, or some external mechanism, that you will consider the applicants in this order of operation. And in that way, we feel like we're still maintaining the preference for instructional staff at the site. Yes.
What's the point of an order of operations if the order of operations doesn't have to follow?
It is followed with
Well, I'm thinking
consideration.
it says, however, nothing in this procedure should be misconstrued to limit this administrator's discretion as it relates to candidate selection, which means you could go over everybody instructional, over everybody non-instructional, and just go to the other. So the question is, then what's the purpose of the order?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with regard to the order of selection, what we mean by that is at the end of the day, the site administrator is responsible for placing the most qualified individual into that position. So you may have 10 people at your school who are interested in that position, but do not have the qualifications.
Well, they have to be qualified, it says like so.
But, or very, very minimally qualified, right? Very, very minimally
It doesn't say
qualified.
minimally qualified, it's qualified.
Well, and so for that reason, we've got the ability to say, no, you're not the best qualified person for this job. And that's something that we maintain as a matter of right. And so at the very same time, we could say, yeah, great, wonderful, you're the one, right? But it really is that we're going to look at those individuals first and say, is there someone from this school? Because as I've said before, it is our preference that if we can get someone qualified at the school, that we want to select those individuals 100%. But that's not always the case.
Is there opposition on the number 3 that you completely struck out to leave the first portion that says site administrators are discouraged from assigning supplemental responsibilities to non-instructional district employees? And just stop period there.
Yeah, we're not strongly discouraging people. That's not our position. The reason why I was strongly discouraged is because we had to pay overtime. So what we're saying is what we have a preference
That's an
for.
interpretation, but
That's what the contract says.
as we've already spoken about the 3 other sections that kind of, and the fact that it's in our contract and nobody else's, is part of the strongly discouraging part. So
So from our perspective, when we say that we You know, the first order of operation is to consider qualified instructional staff from the school. That's the preference that we're giving to the instructional.
That would show.
Right, that, and the fact that we give 85% of all supplements to instructional staff. 85%.
Speaking of that, can we have that data that shows that it's 85% with cross-reference?
Absolutely. So I mean, you know, what we're really looking at here is, you know, there has to be some level of transparency as to what jobs are out there, so that people within our community and, you know, our instructional community, our non-instructional community, and our community at large have transparency around what positions are available. And then we will utilize this order of operations to consider who gets the position. And like I said, the preference is to hire someone an instructional person at our school. And then from after that, it really is about having someone from that school who has that close proximity and relationship with their students, that's valued overall. I mean, I think as we've talked, the principals would rather have someone from the school that is there day to day than someone that's not at the school.
Even if they're less qualified than an instructional staff at a different site.
Yeah.
So it's not about the best person for the job then.
No, I think I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that person then becomes, because that's a prime consideration as to who's qualified, right? Who is the most qualified person? That for most principals, that is one of those areas that they give a lot of weight to, someone that's on site. So that, you know, when you talk about neck and neck, consideration of what their resume says, you know, you have to also take into consideration fit, and also this idea that these individuals are at their school. So while they may be like, you know, this person may be slightly more qualified on paper, right? This person, you know, who knows? They maybe coached a little bit more, right? Maybe been in a different leadership position. But the fact that this person is on site, in our eyes, pushes them above and makes them more.
Can I ask qualifications? If being on site is a qualification, is that part of the job description? Is that part of the qualification? Is that intent said out there?
What do you mean? I mean, what
Like in the
we
posting.
value when we're making a determination is part of the management, right? It's for us to decide because that's part of the the decision-making process, because ultimately we're held, the site administrator is held responsible for every one of those decisions, right? And so having someone that they have control over day to day at their site is a strong consideration, right? Because ultimately they're the ones who are on the line. So they've got that right.
We understand, but I think part of our frustration is hearing that the argument for the last 2 weeks is as if it wasn't our goal as well as getting the best person for the job. Like no one really changed that moniker of like, it's not like only the district was trying to find the best person for the job. But then now there could be a best person for the job, but they're now not qualified or not selected just because of the location of the staff at the school site. So I hope, not asking for an answer or justification, but I'm just hoping that as you hear yourselves from before saying the most qualified person, best person for the students, and then now it's someone that's on site.
Maintain the position that there are multiple factors that play into whether or not the person is the most qualified candidate. And I've been consistent on that front from the very beginning. And I think that if you did a anonymous poll, then that you would hear the same thing. There are numerous factors that a site administrator takes into consideration when they're making a selection. And
just not asking for it to be
Why?
selective in terms of.
I don't understand that. That would be the case.
It's just.
Okay, so as it stands, the order of operations that we've outlined, really, we feel like this would be the best approach from a district perspective to select that would also take into consideration the transparency that needs to be maintained in the kind of circumstance. And then the last language here, student activity, the student activities handbook contains an outline of duties to be performed in the major categories of supplements listed in the chart below. And electronic, this is where we're changing, an electronic version of this handbook shall be made available to Leon County on the Leon County Schools District website.
Any student activity website, so,
Well, I mean, meaning
well,
the student activities website is on the LCS website, so I don't want to be too specific about where it's at. I'm saying that it will be available within the four walls of the district website, wherever.
What's this?
Say it again.
It says it at the beginning, student activities.
Oh, yeah, right. The student activities handbook. And that's all that we're proposing as of today.
I think some of the language that we had considered is not too far off from some of the language that you presented today. I don't have anything formal to print to you to give today, because I'd still like to go back and tweak some of the few things that we had discussed just now on our priority list that I hadn't had a chance to re-itemize out. Some of the major changes was just the structure of Appendix B and shortening it down and getting rid of a lot of the excess. And so that's where my version, when it comes to editing it, and the version that we've been working on, is why it seems like maybe it's going to seem a little bit more red, but it's merely a structure standpoint, not necessarily a language standpoint. So
do you want, so at this point, do you want to provide your substantive changes that you'd like to see, or
Okay,
do you
so-
want to go back and put them into a formal proposal and bring that?
I can provide one substantive change to IA, your additional edit there.
I'm sorry, say it again.
The first one here, IA, you have the appointment into a supplemental role is considered to be at will throughout the year, and the individual may be removed at any time. We had worked on language here to instructional unit cannot be removed from a position without an end of the year review process occurring and a just cause given. So if we're removing people at will, just cause, explanation, there's gotta be a reason.
These are supplemental positions are actually really just assignment of supplemental duties. And so there is no just cause associated with the assignment of these supplements.
I thought you'd say that, but.
That's absolutely true. That's why
I wrote it exactly down. To the point Scott made earlier, people rely on this in their regular incomes. Stop shaking your head, let me finish. You want to keep the same people in supplemented positions because they're so good, they're reappointed, right? And so why would those people after 5 or 10 years not consider it in their regular income, right? And if they're expecting that and then they get suddenly removed without any reason, that doesn't seem,
Hypothetically, hired them.
Yeah, I understand your
for-
managerial perspective, but from the body's perspective is very one-sided. And I think could create other problems if people don't.
Tell me one time, or actually, given that we've got 2,000, so tell me of more than one time where we've just decided randomly to take someone out of the job. I mean, it doesn't happen. That's the reason why. And so we don't feel like that there is a need for this in any way, shape, or form. And also,
chairs and team leaders have been switched on people without the person selecting to come out of those positions. To say it never happens, that's a pretty bold statement.
I didn't say it never happened. I'm just saying
It did.
If I
So tell me it's.
It doesn't.
like for the club perspective, there may have been a club that had lots of membership and student engagement. Then maybe years passed and then that membership went. So maybe the site doesn't see it as a reason to like maintain a supplement because now you have 3 students where before you had 80.
Right.
Yearly. So if, you know, they've been sticking with it, but now they only have 3, but now if they're just ripped out, no reason. I mean, like without being told, like because you only have.
I don't necessarily have problems with, you know, having a discussion with the person, at the end of the process where you say, okay, I'm either like you would for a teacher who's being reappointed. If I'm non-reappointing you, or if I'm reappointing you, you have a discussion that says, this is what's happening, right? I have a real issue with conveying rights to positions that don't currently exist, right? That the idea of having to have just cause to remove someone from a supplemental role is just something that goes well beyond what is currently outlined, right? Because at the end of the day, these are just supplemental duties. They're not an actual position unto themselves. These are supplemental duties that are attached to their role as a teacher, right? So at the end of the day, you know, that job is not something that you have a property right to. It is just that it's an extra set of duties that you receive extra pay for doing.
Would you say that to like maybe a football coach?
Yes, I would, absolutely.
That's where I was getting. It's inconsistent where it's positions that don't exist. They're just supplemental duties. We go on a national search for our coaches for just some supplemental positions. We get kicked into the curb back to California any day.
Yeah, sure.
But it's totally inconsistent. I don't think you tell the coaches that or have this attitude to them. I think you have we will definitely keep you and not get rid of you, and that is,
There has to be some job performance.
so you move them from California as a math teacher and then you take them to a curb a month later because their coaching is insufficient. You've done this.
Well, we're not paying to move anybody. So I mean,
Yeah, we don't
at the end of the day, these people are interested in the opportunity to fulfill that role. But it is not a position unto itself.
Right, but they're not coming here to teach the most incredible language arts class in Leon County. They're coming here.
Well, officially, that's officially, yes, their primary job with this district is to teach a position.
But you made the point that you didn't solicit around the country for a language arts teacher. You solicited a football coach who's coming and we're having them teach because that's the way it works, right?
They teach,
Yeah.
and as their primary job, and then they perform supplemental duties. Now, I mean, sure, in other places that, you know, the football coach is a big deal, and they make it out.
Man.
This is the position, and they pay them thousands of dollars, but that's not the way it's done in this district.
Wait, you're saying that you don't treat your football coach like it's a real big deal in Leon County?
No, we don't pay them. We pay them exactly what's outlined in the supplement. We pay them exactly what's outlined in the supplement schedule. We're not giving those people $20,000, $30,000 a year to get to coach.
And so the booster club doesn't do something like there's.
No.
They don't put camps on that they make additional, they don't do anything. It's just that money amount.
If they're putting on a camp, then that is a private endeavor that's not supported by the school.
Some additional
And-
language.
Am I right there?
Well, they can run a.
They can run. No, hold on. It's okay. Hold on. Please stop.
But they're only paid their hourly rate.
They're paid their hourly rate, and the money does not go back to them to give them some sort of windfall.
No.
It goes back to the school.
Right, and they're paid just for the time there during summer.
So, true, so they do have camps, but the camps are for the betterment of the school, not to line the pockets of those individuals.
It wasn't about lining pockets, it's just that they're.
Let's see,
getting
that
paid an
was
hourly
that
rate.
connotation that you were.
No, I said our football's not, is football not thought as highly in Leon County as elsewhere, and I
Pretty much
would
not.
beg to differ.
But even if it was a big deal, that doesn't change the nature of what the supplemental is.
Right.
Changes your
And so
argument that it's
That
only
language,
supplemental.
language teacher, football coach that is coming to Leon County knows that all the rights attendant to being a teacher are
I don't know
going to,
anything about that.
well, you should
They're paid.
counsel them on
Are
that.
they paid their teacher hourly rate for their football coaching position at that point?
Wait, say it again.
So when they're doing the camp and they're paid an hourly rate, isn't that their teacher hourly rate that they're getting paid to put the camp on?
But it's for the benefit of the school.
I understand that, but then
That's all camps that everyone runs in the summer, they're paid their hourly, no matter who runs it.
but
Whether
they're
it's a
paid
math
their
camp,
teacher salary, correct?
They're paid their teacher salary, yes.
Okay, so it's the hourly rate, which is a job that is now a supplemented job. So we can't say it's just a supplemental position when we're paying them hourly rate to do the same duties that they would have been doing.
So
So
this is,
I
you know, but this is summer camp, this is summer camp, little kids, I mean, this volleyball, I mean,
And I mean, well, there's also, what if you don't get enough money? I mean, this is real stuff. So if you don't get enough money, nobody gets paid. Right? So that actually happens too. Sometimes you will say, we're hoping to get 100 kids and only 10 kids show up. Right? You gotta send some people, you gotta move them on and say, maybe you gotta reduce or you close it all
Yeah,
together.
the whole point was.
So they
that
have
the
to,
camp-
the fees, if you don't have those in there, nobody.
the fees drive the hourly rate that they get paid. Like they need that fee in order to get the hourly rate. Like what's the funding source of the hourly rate?
They come from the camp,
Okay,
but
so they get paid.
they're, to say that a coach is putting on a camp and, that camp may make $50,000, that money is gonna go then into the pockets of that head coach. That head coach walks away with $50,000 that no other teacher
This
has.
is helpful. This is very clarifying.
Basically what it does is, and this happens for football, it happens for math. It happens for volleyball, it happens for drama. It happens for all sorts of things, any number of things that are out there that where they're holding a camp for children, during that time frame. And that compensation really is just to, the compensation that they're getting on an hourly rate is just to basically run that program.
And the overages go to the school
Yeah.
for discretionary spending for that program.
You want to speak, you're more knowledgeable about how exactly, there's
They're not
20.
supposed to, there's
Yeah, go.
supposed to be equivalent to what the cost of paying the teachers
Yeah.
and the staff that are there. There's not supposed to be any overs to go into a booster or any kind of
Right.
extra.
But in the case of,
In the case of, it would be put into district funds where that they would have to request and do that sport if they were or organization
It all-
that they needed.
It all
It doesn't
follows
go-
the
it goes
sort
into
of,
a district fund. It doesn't stay in there in front of them.
it follows the whole, the same audit process that any other funds for the district have, right? So if there are students that are spending money, the money that comes into that program is supposed to be spent on those students, right?
They're
So
supposed to budget
they should not be.
$47.50 per kid for driver's ed. So that way it cover the cost of the teacher and everything, so they know what the cost.
So it's not creating this huge windfall of money that goes into the coffers. Basically you price the program in a way so that it covers what the expenses are. That way you keep expenses down.
That's by audit, that's by the teacher, it has, you're not supposed to keep any money, because it's spent on the little kids that are there.
And keep in mind, these are members of your union, that have sources of income during the summer because of these kinds of things, right?
we're learning about how it works.
I don't know exactly. I think this is gonna fall somewhere into a subset of IA. Is we would like some consideration for the idea that positions that are not filled by a Leon County school employee, instructional or non-instructional, are considered vacant every year. And given that opportunity, because people shift school sites, that someone might shift from site A to site B. Site B was currently filling that position with Johnny's dad. That position's now can be considered vacant. Maybe that teacher that shifted into that school could fill that position instead. But if it's automatically reappointed to somebody outside of the district, then they don't necessarily have that opportunity to do that. And so some consideration to language for specifically non-LCS employees, positions becoming vacant. It's only 15% of all supplements, but it would provide that opportunity.
Because most of the 15% are non-instructional. So for clarity, you're just saying the ones that are supplement only
Yes,
positions,
being
that they
considered
be considered for
vacant,
reconsidered each year.
yes. To be
That's something that we can talk
offered,
about.
you know, as
It's what.
order of operations,
No, no.
so,
Instructional.
But just for clarity, just the supplemental positions, not the non-instructional position.
starting there, yeah.
For consideration. And so it's definitely something we can talk.
But at this point, I don't have any additional information that I would wanna.
Can I read this real quick? The parties now agree that for the 2023-2024 school year, any member of the instructional bargaining unit who held the supplement the position the year before may continue in that position at the discretion of the principal, and that position does not need to be considered vacant. That's what we agreed upon. So if you're not a part of the instructional bargaining unit, then that's not needed.
No, this is just speaking to the instructional bargaining unit. There's no, just because it excludes others doesn't mean that we are. And you and I spoke directly about that point, Pamela. I mean,
It reads as it reads.
and I would argue that what you're reading is not say what you think it says. It's not to the exclusion from others. It's specific to instructional staff. Now, if it said non-instructional staff shall not be considered, then I would say, yeah, you're right. It absolutely says that, but it's silent to non-instructional staff.
I think at this point, that's where we can wrap up for today.
Absolutely. I just like, so to the greatest extent possible, if you could provide with your full proposal, then the next time we could work on it.
Yes, no, that's. Yeah, I think that this gives me a better point to go back and start working together again. As opposed to starting with the language that we all wanted to scrap at one point and reconsider if this is a better way of working.
Okay. And from our perspective, I mean, it doesn't do any good for us to go back and forth on some of these issues. There are positions that we feel very strongly about. There's interpretation of the current language that we feel very strongly about. And so for us to argue and throw, tax stones or shoot arrows, whatever, it doesn't do it. If we're going to make progress on this language, we've got to be at least willing to see from the other perspective side. And what we're really trying to do here is avoid administrative minutia, right, and burden, and really focus on trying to fill these positions with individuals at the site. And we feel like, quite honestly, if we could get every single one of them out of the teachers union, we will. Right? But that's just not a reality. When it comes down to a lot of the ones that we don't fill out of the teachers unit right now, it's because we can't. It's because there's a lack of interest. Right? I don't know of one principal who is just like, I'm not hiring a teacher for this position. They're not taking that position. So, I mean, I just hope that we can consider to, take that into consideration as we move forward and understand that this cannot be a major factor in what we do every single year, because we've got so many bigger fish to fry, right? In this process.
Can I ask something? Mr. here. What do you feel about elementary and supplements?
She asked for a management perspective.
Yeah. So I mean, that Joe and Scott over there are definitely high school and definitely, the sports related.
We don't have that many.
Okay.
This year is the most that we've ever had because of the district added a few. Social media. What else do we got?
Yearbook,
Yearbook.
all levels.
So, I mean, I was sharing with them, I need another robotic person. I needed a, social media person. And the person that I have listed, she's not really gonna go home doing it. Like. Sometimes they're not easy to do.
I think what might be Tim's angle is, are there, because there are so many high school opportunities and then more middle, what are the areas of opportunity in elementary that are not being recognized that would be helpful to manage the school site? That's kind of, it does.
You didn't ask me that.
That's what I'm translating. I'm trying to know. So, because the thing is, outside of all this first section stuff, we really want to recognize like the agriculture person who drives to the school every week during the summer, who may or may not be getting a supplement, the steel pan that's going on over where, you know, Mr. Shealy rents the moving truck and does at least 6 to 8 performances a year, but isn't getting the same kind of money that some other folks that do very similar type things at a high school level, some equity in those things. So what are those things? I think is something that we can have conversations around to identify and recognize people for the things they do to support students.
Some needs that you have.
in school
Elementary.
sites. So,
The one that I can think of off the top of my head would be, music, if they have performances. I know some schools put on a lot of performances, other schools do not. So I don't think it would be a supplement that every single